Welcome to the Retirement Roadmap Show. I'm your host, David Nagy. And in the studio, we have our infamous Tony Shore. Tony, how are you, buddy?
I am doing great today because I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, and it's great to get back together with you again to record a new episode of the Retirement Roadmap Show. But yeah, I'm excited about it. Looking forward to hanging out with you today. And I am going to Nashville this weekend to celebrate my 60th birthday. They're throwing a little bash for me there.
Well, happy birthday. You don't look a day over 50.
Thank you. I'll take it. Hey, I'll take it. I think everyone says they can't believe I'm 60, and I think it's my immaturity. It throws people off, David. That's what I tell everyone.
It's that fabulous head of hair you have.
Yeah, I don't have any. People are going, do you dye it? Or I'm like, no, I don't dye my hair. There are grays. Trust me, my kids point out every gray hair. Dad, on the side, you've got some gray coming in. Like, thanks, kids. Thanks for noticing.
You earned those gray hairs.
Yeah, it's their fault.
You tell them, they're the reason. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're the reason I have these gray hairs. Yeah.
Well, I hope you have a great time. I love it there. It's a fun time.
My wife and I are excited. You know, we lived there for 6 years, so a lot of our friends, I worked in the music industry there, so we have a lot of friends there and haven't been back in a little bit. So
you have a lot of friends everywhere, Tony. Well, everybody loves you.
Well, yeah, I lived in Southern Cal for about 5.5 years, Southern California, and in Costa Mesa, right on the edge of Newport Beach. And then I moved to Nashville, and then back here. I'm originally from Minnesota, and so is my wife. So we got married, and then our first 6 years we lived in Nashville, didn't have kids, wanted to have kids. All our family was back in Minnesota, so we moved back. I wish we both kind of regret moving back in one sense. It was a great place. It's better to raise our kids here. Minnesota has great schools, and our family was here, but we personally, her and I really liked living in Nashville. So
yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's gotten a little crowded downtown, gets a little crazy down there, but the surrounding areas are still great. So, all right.
That's everywhere. Yeah, let's jump in. You ready?
Yep. What are we talking about today? Retirement and why going it alone is risky.
Yeah.
Where do you want to begin?
Well, I think, the old retirement playbook just doesn't work anymore. The rules for retirement have changed.
Yep.
And a lot of people are out there DIYing it. And, DIYing your retirement today is like flying through a storm without instruments, Tony. It's just not recommended.
No.
And there's just so many landmines that people don't, you don't know what you don't know. And when I do my workshops, every time I do a workshop, people come up at the end of the workshop and they say, geez, Dave, no one ever told me about this. I've never heard of this. And one of those is kind of one of the first topics I want to talk about, and that is sequence of returns.
Okay. What is that?
Well, it's interesting because usually we have 30 to 50 people in our workshops. And I'll ask people, has anyone ever heard of sequence of returns? Raise your hand. And usually not a single person in the audience will raise their hand. Maybe once in a while, one person or two people, but most people have never heard of sequence of returns. And why you've never heard of it is because when you're working during your accumulation phase, when you're building your retirement, I liken it to climbing Mount Everest, sequence of returns makes no difference. Now, everyone's heard of average rate of return, right? You've heard of average rate of return, Tony?
Oh, sure.
Sure. Yep. If you take 20 years of return, some are positive 4, 5, 10, negative 5, 6, 20. You add them all up, you divide it by 20, and you're going to get an average rate of return over those 20 years. And you can take a sequence of returns that starts out with good years, and then you have some bad years at the end, and you flip that around. It's the same average rate of return, but now it's in a different sequence, right? So the bad years are in the beginning, and the good years are in the end. The same average rate of return, but it can absolutely destroy your retirement if you have some bad years in the beginning. And it's not how much you earn in retirement, it's when you earn it. And if the markets hit you early in retirement, it can permanently damage your income plan. So sequence of return risk is a real thing. And most people go into retirement not even thinking about it. And that can be a big mistake.
Well, sure, and it is one of the major risks that are out there, and that is sequence of returns risk. When you take the money, when you need it, where you're taking it from, and is the market down when you're pulling it out? That's the sequence of returns risk. And I do want to note for our listeners and viewers out there, you said sequence, not sequins. Just a sequence of return. We're not talking
those are your
about
Nashville days, Tony.
Porter Wagner or Elvis. We're not talking about sequins, right?
No, we're not.
No Minnie Pearl or Dolly Parton or Porter Wagner here.
No,
That's
sir.
that's the Nashville coming out, I guess. When I hear sequence of returns, I said, "Did you say sequence?" And Dave always corrects me. No, Tony, we're talking about sequence.
Yes.
But I think timing is what sequence of returns is all about, right? I mean, timing
and in fact,
timing actually matters more than it's more than just how much you have. It's when you have it, where it's coming from, right?
Yeah, 100%. Look, people don't have pensions anymore. You don't have that guaranteed income anymore. Interest rates are so unreliable. I asked the crowd the other day in the workshop, I said, does anybody remember what the 3-year CD was paying back in 2017? And they all said, I don't know, 3, 4. And I said, no, 0.5.
Yes.
0.5%. And they went, oh my goodness. And then they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Right. And then the other big unknown in the deck there is longevity. People are living so much longer than they're planning for today. And I tell that to people, but it doesn't seem to register with a lot of clients that they're going to probably live to be 90, 95 years old.
Right.
And I don't think they really start thinking about it. But then I ask them, well, how old are your parents? Oh, dad's 92. How old's mom? Oh, mom's 98. Okay, well, there's a pretty good chance you're going to live as long or longer.
And if you retire at 62, which is the average age for retirement right now for people, that's 30 years in retirement, 92. Yeah. And people always say, I'm not going to live that long. I won't live past 80. But then the majority of people now do live past 80. So,
and there's a psychology behind that. It's actually, people have a hard time imagining that they're going to live that long. It's how the brain works.
It is.
And that's one of the reasons why it's important to have an advisor, right? To sit you down and go, look, let's just plan for 30 years. Maybe you don't live for 30 years, but I always tell people when they come into the office, look, I want to underpromise and overdeliver. We want to make sure this plan works no matter how long you live. And it's just common sense. But again, that's that DIY mentality. Everyone wants to do it themselves today.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work for a lot of people. And we're seeing more and more people that come into my office all the time. Geez, Dave, I wish I would have met you 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I wish I would have met you 10 years ago. Why didn't my current advisor tell me this? Because what you did to get to where you're at is not what you should do when you're in retirement.
I wish I had met David Nagy 50 years ago.
I do too, Tony.
That's my
we would have gotten into too much trouble though, probably.
Yeah, as youngsters together, I think we would have been in trouble right there. Well, yeah, and so that's a big one. And then I know part of this retirement has changed. And another reason you shouldn't go it alone are those first few years. A lot of people slip up and make costly mistakes, like the first 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah, they're crucial. Those 5 years coming into retirement and those first 3 to 5 years once you've retired, because look, you stopped earning a paycheck. And I talk about this in chapter 5 of my first book. We talk about income in retirement, and I talk about the retirement cliff. When that paycheck stops, you are permanently unemployed. Yeah. You're not getting a paycheck anymore.
Yeah, it's like I ask people, do you think if you knew that in 6 months from now or a year that you were going to be fired or laid off from your job and you'd never be able to find another job? I don't care how old you are, where you're working. If you knew that, like for sure in 6 months, I'm going to be let go, or in 1 year, I'm going to be let go, and you would never get another job again, would you spend your money differently or do anything differently? And people are like, oh, of course. Yeah. If I knew I was getting laid off in a month or 6 or 12 months from now, I would save way more, and no, I would never get another job. I'd have to start really saving. Well, that's what retirement is. People don't look at it. They look at being laid off from a job or fired differently than retirement, but think about it in those terms to make it a little more urgent. That's what
absolutely. I love it when I say that in my workshop. Everyone they jump back. They go, "Oh wow, I never thought about it that way."
Right.
And then not only have you stopped earning a paycheck, but now you're taking money out of your accounts. During your working years, you're adding to those accounts. You're growing them. And when the market has a bad year, it's a good thing for you because you're adding to those accounts. You're buying stock at a discount. But when you retire and now you're withdrawing from those accounts and the market has a bad year, you're taking money out at the worst possible time. You're dollar cost averaging in reverse.
Yeah.
You're fully exposed to the market volatility. And then inflation. We haven't even talked about inflation. Inflation, taxes, and sequence of returns can absolutely ruin your retirement dreams. And now add longevity onto that.
Yeah.
And that's a mix for disaster. And then one of the biggest problems that people, they always say, "Oh, Dave, I would never do that. Oh, the market's down 20%, buy." It's easy to say that. But when you're retired and now it's all you have left and the market's down 20, down 30, down 40, behavioral mistakes, or what I call panic selling, is prevalent. And people always say, "Oh, that won't happen to me," but it does.
It
does. It happens more often than you'd think to people that are actually seasoned investors that have done really well to grow it. It's a different animal when you're retired.
Yeah. And you saw it, you and I, David, saw it last April in 2025, last year in April, when the tariffs were announced. The market dropped 19, almost 20%.
Yep. In 1 month.
In 1 month, it dropped 20%. And then people wanted to get out, like, I got to get out of the market. The economy's going to tank. The inflation's going to skyrocket because of tariffs. And some people did. They got out. Well, within a couple of weeks, within a short period of time, the market hit record highs. And then for the next 3 years, it's hit record highs. It hit a record high last year after that happened. So I think we've had 3 good years in the market, but then we have a correction like that or a dip because of one little thing and people panic. And so emotions will, if you're doing it yourself, your emotions will eventually take over and you'll make a costly mistake.
And typically it's not when we have a 1 month market hit. It's when the market's down for a quarter and then another quarter. And then another quarter. Now we're 3 quarters into the year, you're down 20%. That's when people make really bad decisions.
Yes.
And that's why having a plan is so important. Why having a team of CFPs, CPAs, CFAs, investment advisors, our whole team puts together a plan for clients so that we make sure that when the market's down, there's a bucket that we're never going to touch when the market's down. And the market's down, we have a bucket for income. It doesn't matter if the market's down. We have to have a plan in place to avoid these panic selling and bad decisions. And it happens way too frequently.
Yeah.
And then now you've got taxes that people, it's the silent killer out there, Tony. It's the thing that people aren't talking about. And I call it the ticking time bomb. And in the workshop, we talk about this quite a bit. And, one of the things that people really don't have a plan for is how are they going to take RMDs? How is that
required minimum distributions?
Oh, it's
just to clarify what an RMD is, in case our listeners don't know the term. That's a required minimum distribution. If you have tax deferred retirement accounts, which most people do, 401ks, traditional IRAs, the government, when you hit, it used to be 70 and a half, then 72, now it's 73. When you hit that age, you have to take money out and pay full taxes on that. And that could put you in another bracket, right?
Oh, it can put you in another bracket. It can force you to take money out of those investments at the worst time. Mm-hmm. It creates a lot of problems. IRMA costs can skyrocket. And then there's the future tax rates. I always say in my workshops, the tax code's written in pencil. There's a reason for that because it's going to change.
Yeah, they say we're in historical low tax brackets right now.
Yep.
So now might be the time to take care of some of this because
Absolutely.
it's not going to stay that way. Well, they said permanent. No, it's only that only means it's not set to automatically expire. That's what that
Correct.
means.
Yeah,
So
and
there's no auto expire, but they will change it. They're going to raise
absolutely they will. In
taxes.
fact,
They have to.
Tony, they've made 7 permanent tax changes over the last 50 years, right?
Yeah.
And none of those were permanent. They all got changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And one of the things that we do for our clients when they come in is we put together a plan for taxes. And there's a window, you talked about it for Roth conversions. Now is a great time, but you have to have a plan. A lot of times clients come in and they say, okay, we want to do Roth conversions. But we want to take income from here. And I'm like, well, you don't want to take income from those accounts if we're going to do Roth conversions. And they don't realize, oh yeah, that's probably not a good idea. So most retirees don't run out of money. They run into taxes.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, the U.S. national debt right now is over $39 trillion. And I think that number is so ridiculous that it doesn't mean anything to anybody. I mean, that's real money, even to you, David. That's real money.
And it's a math problem, right?
Yeah.
People always say, well, oh, I'm not worried about the debt. Well, you should be, because mathematically they're going to have to do something about it. And you've got to have a plan, not only now, but for what's going to happen into the future. And, this is why advice matters more after you retire, right? You've got to have a distribution strategy, a timing strategy, discipline. You get retirees that retire. Let's take an example of 2 retirees. They retire at the same time and they get an average return of 6%. One gets bad years in the beginning. One gets good years in the beginning. The guy that had bad years in the beginning, he's going to run out of money. And it's not about picking hot stocks or trying to beat the market in retirement, right? This is where a good advisor really is going to add value in helping you avoid big mistakes, especially just before you retire and when you're in retirement. And that's when the stakes are the highest, because mistakes in retirement, you can't undo. You can't go back to work and earn more money. I say this in my workshop all the time. If you retire and 5 years after you retire, you realize, oops, I made some really bad choices and decisions. I better go back to my employer and ask for my job back. Do you think they're going to give you your job back?
No. Probably not the same position, and especially not at the same price.
Yeah. And so this is why a team concept is so important, Tony. And in fact, Vanguard, they did a study. It's called the Advisor Alpha Study. And they found that working with a financial advisor adds around 3% in net returns per year, but not from picking stocks. It's from putting together a plan for taxes, having a strategy, proper asset allocation. And most importantly, what they found is behavioral coaching when things get tough or when they're trying to decide where to take money from. That's when it's so important to have a team behind you. And our team is, your advisor, which is me, our CPAs, our state attorneys, making sure we have a plan for long-term care, our CFPs, our CPAs. It's amazing what we do for clients and the plan that we build. And I love it. I had a client leave the office last week and he was holding his plan. And he said, Dave, I'm so glad that I have a plan now. I'm not worried about my retirement anymore. And it's why we do what we do. It's nothing better than helping people create those plans as they transition.
Yeah. Well, and you always say, David, that the most important financial decisions of your life happen before you retire, not after. So what are some of those decisions we need to be making before we retire?
Well, you got to start looking at, when are we going to take Social Security?
Yeah.
Social Security timing is so important. Are we going to do Roth conversions? Because Roth conversions aren't for everybody. But for some of those, it's crucial. So when are we going to do them? How are we going to do them? Where am I going to get my income from? And structuring how that's going to look, because most clients today, 90% of the clients I meet with, they don't have pensions. They don't have guaranteed income. They've got Social Security, which is great. But for most people, that's not enough. Mm-hmm. And then is it time to maybe start dialing back the risk? When do we start, looking at the risk we're taking and putting together a plan? Because it's simple when you're young. Look, when you're 20, 30 years old, it's pretty simple to put it into a couple of ETFs and just put money in and not think about it. That's not a good plan when you retire. And I liken that to, when you're young, you got a pediatrician, right? And very specialized for when you're younger. Then typically when you become a teenager, your early 20s, most people don't even go to the doctor. They don't even think about it, right? And
Right.
then you get older, okay, maybe I need a primary care doctor. I need to make sure my cholesterol is right. But look, when you're 60, 70 years old, you have a heart problem. You're not going to go to your pediatrician or your primary care doctor.
No.
You're going to find a specialist, someone
Yeah.
that's a heart specialist. And they're going to run a lot of tests. They're going to make sure, look, we've got to make sure we get your high blood pressure in order. Maybe you've got some blockage. And this is where retirement is very similar. Look, what you did to get to retirement is not what you should be doing in retirement. You need a retirement specialist like myself and my team to help you transition, to make sure that the plan works as you transition.
Yeah. And a lot of things do change. We're talking about retirement changes, and a lot changes between those accumulation years when we're earning and putting money in to when we're retired. And so your portfolio is built for earning. It's not necessarily built for retirement. So there are changes that need to be made, right?
Oh, 100%. Look, if your portfolio looks the same at age 65 as it did when you were 45, that's probably a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is why smart investors make bad decisions in bad markets. They sell low. They sit on too much cash. Oh my goodness. I can't tell you how many times over the last 30 years I've had clients come in sitting on millions in cash because they're waiting for the market to correct.
Oh,
That never happens,
yeah.
right? Or chasing performance. I always tell people, look, our portfolio managers, they don't look backwards at what a stock did over the last 5 to 10 years to make a decision on whether they should still own it. We're analyzing the company, the management. We're looking at everything about that stock, whether or not it's a good decision to buy it and to hold it, and when to sell it. So chasing performance never really works, and especially in retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to do that. You don't want to try to time the market. That's a mistake. What else do you want to talk about here?
Well, I think as we get towards the end of the show, I think we should talk about income, right? The most important thing, whether you're working, whether you're retired, whether you have $50,000 in the bank or $5 million in the bank, I don't care. For every single listener out there, the most important thing for all of you is income.
Yep.
And income in retirement is the new growth. You have to stop focusing on account value and start focusing on income reliability. And I think, if I was to leave our listeners with that, that's probably one of the most important things you got to start focusing on in retirement, because the retirement industry, by and large, has it backwards. I saw a commercial the other day for, one of these other advisors out there, and I laugh every time I see this commercial because it's backwards. There's too much focus on accumulation, not enough on distribution. Most advisors out there, and I see it every time when clients come in, they still manage clients like they're 40 years old. Look, you only get one shot at retirement, ladies and gentlemen. There's no do-overs. And I get the pleasure and the honor of helping people every day build a retirement plan. But you have to remember, you only get one shot at it. So I highly recommend pick up the phone, give my office a call, 619-460-9433. Again, 619-460-9433. Get in here. Let us give you a complimentary strategy session. We'll get to know you, understand your situation, and we'll put together a plan, all complimentary. You can go to our website, srswealthmanagement.com. Again, srswealthmanagement.com. You can look at some of the tools that we use. We got some great tools on there. You can see what we do for our clients. You can book an appointment online, but do yourself a favor, come in, because you don't know what you don't know. And you can't get a second opinion from the person that gave you the first.
Exactly. Well, that's great. I encourage our listeners and viewers to pick up the phone, give you a call, or go to SRS Wealth. Is it SRSwealthmanagement.com?
.com, yep.
Yep, SRSwealthmanagement.com.
Right
A
behind
lot of great tools and devices on there for people to use. A lot of great educational tools as well. Well, hey, David, great show today. Listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of the Retirement Roadmap with our host, David Nagy.